All right. Good morning, everyone. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is back here on a Tuesday morning, November 18th, 2025. I'm your host, Chris Baker, here as always with your Sabres beat writer from The Athletic. That's Matthew Fairburn. You can find all of Matthew's work at theathletic.com/Sabres. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. Like this video. We like the thumbs up. And you can also hit that notification bell so you know when a video drops or when Matthew and I go live. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please leave a 5-star review. All right, Matthew Fairburn, let's just kind of dive right in. Rasmus Dahlin is back with the Buffalo Sabres, and it's led to a pair of victories. Sabres overcame a 4-1 deficit, turn a 5-4 win. In Detroit on Saturday, they followed it up on home ice just last night on Monday evening with a 5-1 win over the Edmonton Oilers. Noah Ostlund with a pair of goals in that one. Bo Byram, Beck Malenstein each get singles. Tage Thompson sinks the long putt. Colton Ellis in net for both games to improve to 3-1 on the year. So the Sabres are now 7-8-4, tied for last in the East with the Toronto Maple Leafs. What a year it's been thus far in the NHL. So Dahlin's back. They win a pair of games. Is everything right in Saberland, Matthew Fairburn? Let's just kind of dive right in.
Yeah, you got to start canceling those late April vacation plans, kid. It's going to be a busy spring. No,
is that right? Is that right? I'd love to hear you. I'd love to hear why.
They need to do it for more than 2 games, I think, before anybody's going to really believe that they've turned things around. That's been sort of the theme of this team at times over the last few years is their backs against the wall. They can claw back a little bit, but can they sustain it, right? They're still not above 500 right now. They're 7-8-4. They have 5 regulation wins all season. That win on Saturday was their first win on the road all season. So they're still in desperation mode in my mind. Saturday was really desperate. They go down 4-1. And it looked legitimately like their season was on the line. I don't know that you lose that game and come back home as sharp as they were, against the Oilers. Like, I think winning in the fashion that they did allowed them to carry some good mojo into the homestand. But I feel like they need to counteract the losing streak with the winning streak before we start to take any sort of playoff push seriously. What's interesting, I looked this up because I was curious. The Canadians on this date last year were 7-10-2, 16 points, minus 17 goal differential, last in the Eastern Conference, 3 points out of the second wild card. The Sabres are 7-8-4, 18 points, minus 9 goal differential, 4 points out of a wild card spot. The Canadians, of course, ended up in a playoff spot last year. So it is not as if it's impossible to claw out of this, but the Canadians went on a really strong run. And as we outlined on Friday, the points pace that the Sabres need to play at is a really, really strong points pace. And so they still have plenty to prove, I think, here. That was an impressive showing against the Oilers, an impressive comeback against the Red Wings after 2 pretty lousy periods. But the flaw with this team has always been, over the last few years, consistency. And so maybe the real test in some ways is Wednesday night against Calgary and not playing down or, to one of the only teams below them in the NHL standings. Like, you can get up for the Connor McDavid game. You can, get a push when your back's against the wall. How do they sustain that energy on Wednesday against a Calgary team that is struggling right now?
Yeah, and I'm sure that the audience kind of maybe picked up a little bit on my sarcasm, but just in case, I don't believe everything is right in Saberland. Okay, we have to ask the question, obviously, but no, there's still a lot of work to do with this team. Before the game last night, I texted you and I said, man, I don't like this lineup. just didn't love the line configurations. You're looking at it now with Kesselring down, still missing Zucker, Kulik, all these guys, Benson, who's a big part of, the activity whenever he's out there on the ice. I wasn't surprised though at the same time of the outcome, because it's still a team that has their backs against the wall, and that's when they seem to kind of get it together and show life and give the fan base hope. But the reality is, to your point, we will know more about this team on Wednesday. A very, very winnable game in a year when parity is just like right at the forefront of everything in the NHL right now. And I'm like you, very curious to see how they come out, because a lot of times with this team, we've seen them get a couple wins under their belt, end a losing streak, whatever the case, feel like they've accomplished something, and then they crash right back down to earth. And it's a game-to-game league
That's
this
been
year
the
with this
biggest.
Buffalo Sabres. Yeah.
They were 0-3, and they fought back from that, and then found themselves into another losing streak. They've had losing streaks. I think they've had 3 separate losing streaks now or winless streaks, sorry, of at least
Yeah.
3 games. They lost 3 in a row to start the season. Then they lost 3 straight overtime games at the end of October. And then they had the 5-gamer, 4 of which were in regulation, that they just ended. And there was the stat a few years ago also about every time they got within 2 points of a playoff spot, or like anytime their points percentage in those games was brutal. And so really maybe Wednesday isn't the test. Maybe the test is if they ever manage to climb within a few points and have a real shot at pushing through, then what does it look like? And if they get there, what does it look like when they have everybody's attention, when they have their own attention, more importantly, when they have some real pressure. So this is better than the alternative. Don't get me wrong, right? When they were sitting there at 4-1 against Detroit, it really did look bleak. It looked like, you were getting to the point where how can they, find their way back from this? And then they come home and take on an Edmonton team. I mean, look, first game back from a road trip is never easy. And Edmonton was already, mid-road trip. And we know the Oilers haven't been playing great this year, but they're a dangerous team. They shut down Connor McDavid in a big way, a good team effort. They still have enough guys, it seems like, playing hard the right way. Like, I don't think this team has totally given up. It's just a matter of when you go to the rink every night as a Sabres fan, you're wondering which version of the Sabres is going to show up. If that one shows up, the one from Monday night, for 90% of the games the rest of the way, then they might have a puncher's chance. But can we count on that team to show up even 50 or 60% of the time, I guess is really the question.
Just with the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team, they come back and get the win in Detroit, and then they had the lead last night, and you're waiting for them to lose it against Edmonton, or at least let them back in the game. Like, you just never know with this group. And maybe to a certain extent, I can't believe I'm going to say this because the fans are going to kill me, maybe that's what makes this team fun. Is that,
makes them interesting. That's for sure.
But maybe interesting is a better word. Yeah, certainly not
fun for us,
if you're
I guess,
a diehard fan. But I was mentioning the lineup, and I was looking at Ostlund's placement and trying to figure out what Lindy was doing. Look, it worked out, pair of goals. And, you look at these young guys. I think we should probably talk about them a little bit. I mean, it's nice to see Thompson scoring in a few games in a row now, and the move back to the middle of the ice seemed to have really jump-started his game a little bit, fair to say. Beast mode was activated on Saturday. I mean, that cut to the front of the net was just a really nice goal. The overtime play, just chucking DeBrincat. It was almost like on the Howard Stern show, and they used to throw, Hank the Angry Dwarf around, or that whole crew. They did the tossing of the height challenged. But anyways, we can talk about Thompson, but I think I'd really rather talk about the young guys. Ostlund and Rosén have really taken this opportunity and done some really nice things with it. Um, not perfect. Like when you talk about Osland, the guy just still the face-offs are a real issue with him. But overall, I mean, are these guys like? Let's just kind of talk about what they're doing, and is there a long-term forecast here now that you can see for these players this season? Is what happens when this team, if this team returns to health? I mean, should these guys be getting out of the hotel and looking for maybe a different place to kind of stash their stuff?
Yeah, I would see if their fellow countryman has some room in his big house. I think Darlene should take these guys in, and maybe that means they don't need to get an apartment, right? But they can, be a little bit more comfortable and uh, ride down to the rink with. I feel like it would help. Uh, I'm half joking, but I do feel like it would help these two guys, especially Osland. I feel like is still, getting used to the language, and he's a little bit more of a reserved, shy personality. So I think it helps him having Roseanne around, and probably helps having Darlene around as well. But I do think these guys are getting close to that point where they might want to start poking around at apartments and figuring out what it might look like if they're here beyond when this team gets healthy. And I think they have still some runway to prove it, because I don't think this team is going to be back at full health tomorrow. So, Jason Zucker was back on the ice at practice or at morning skate on Monday. He's probably the weekend at the earliest, given the weight that he lost, the conditioning he lost. They're going to have to be careful there. Josh Norris was also with the team on Monday. No contact jersey. That one will stretch beyond a week for sure. I think that's still rough estimate in my head is at least a couple of weeks. He's somewhere in the middle of that timeline. Lindy Ruff said he's ahead of schedule, but he certainly wasn't putting a firm timeline on it. Zach Benson, still in the walking boot, did not participate in morning skate on Monday. Danforth has not begun skating with the team. So, and Kulik, same thing. We know that the timetable on that stretches out a little longer. To me, that gives Osland and Roseanne a little bit longer here, at least a few more games to keep building on this. But they have been two of their most consistent players at forward. And Osland doing it last night, to your point, in a line, on a line that was not necessarily a stylistic match, right?
Yeah.
You don't have Osland pegged as a fourth liner based on skill set, but he still found a way to make the most of it. He's playing incredibly confident. He's a fantastic skater, opens up, a ton of space out there with the way that he skates, sees the game so well. It really, when he's confident and he's got the puck on his stick, like now that he's getting comfortable in the NHL, you can see the way that he just kind of makes the game look easy at times. Your point about the faceoffs is a good one, because he was 1 for 5 last night. Still not uh, proficient in that area. I think that's probably a strength issue.
He
But
was 8% the other night. I
yeah,
don't know, was that Saturday's game or the game before? He was 8% too. I mean, and he took a more than 5. I mean,
yeah, he's having a tough time in the faceoff circle. So maybe they have a weird center situation. I feel like, where even when Norris comes back, somebody was asking me yesterday, would it be a good idea for him to not take faceoffs? Depending if it would help with the injury. And there could be a situation where you have him not take the faceoff, but you have him play in the middle of the ice. That might be the type of thing you would want to do with Osland, right? Is
yeah.
uh, not have him take the faceoff, but actually have him play in the middle, because he is good in the middle of the ice. But I've just really liked the way he's built on his game, and you're seeing all of the upside now that he's a little bit more confident. And Roseanne, I feel like, just keeps kind of raising his floor a little bit. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like these games that aren't, he had the 2-goal game last week, but you're seeing him just involved offensively pretty consistently and playing mostly mistake-free hockey away from the puck, staying on the right side of the puck, closing on people quick, using his skating. He almost had a goal last night, right at the front of the net, just missed. Had the assist on Oslin's power play goal. So both of these guys, when you're thinking about their utility going forward, Mason Geertson's still on this roster. So who would you rather have? They haven't had Mason Geertson for a stretch of games here. They haven't put him in the lineup. Do they really need that tough guy enforcer when they've got, a few guys willing to do that job? They're going to have an interesting puzzle to put together here when everybody gets healthy.
It's not just, Geertson's utility or lack thereof. Mallenstein, I was thinking about this last night. The season that he's having has been, I think, notable. And he seems to play a more forceful, physical game with Dunn out there with him. And if Geertson can only play 5 minutes, does that limit Mallenstein's ability a little bit? Having Dunn around has been a major proponent, in my opinion, to back Mallenstein. And how many times has that bottom line been the unit that's been going consistently throughout a game this season? So if you think about it, Kozak stylistically is a better match for those two big wingers. But the fact that they've been going and they just play a simple direct game and they get in on the forecheck, it actually works pretty well for Oslin. Gets him opportunities. It gets him space to use his skill, his hands. And when you package that in the offensive zone with Oslin's ability to support his defenseman in the defensive zone, how many times last night was he beneath the goal line supporting the play and getting the puck out, helping get the puck out of the zone? Critically important in the minutes that he's going to get. So in a way, on paper, I was like, I don't know. It worked. And I wouldn't be surprised if Lindy sticks with it. Rosane last night, just my take on him. I think you nailed it. His ceiling is definitely elevating with each shift, it seems, that he gets. The confidence, the more tenacious nature that he has when he gets the puck and using his skating gears, changing his speeds is noticeable. Got a new centerman. He's getting different experience now, playing with different guys. Last night, he was playing on the McLeod line. I think 5-on-5 last night. 10-5 advantage in scoring chances, 5-1 high danger when Rosane was on the ice last night. It's a pretty good number for a kid. Still cutting his teeth. So yeah, on the whole, I'm into potting. I like getting cultural guys together, and I don't know if Darlene has a personal chef and if they can get tastes of home with that, but I think it's a good idea. I think if they're not already out of the hotel and crashing with him. And by the way, Rasmus would probably appreciate the company.
I would think so. I mean, that would be a kind of a personal thing on Darlene's part. I don't know, if you need some time to decompress or if it would be good, to have the company. I think if it were me, I think the company would be good. I think the house is big enough that he could probably still get away and decompress and have some time to himself to call back home and all that. And it worked out pretty well for Benson staying, out there, taking advantage of the hot tub. And well, Benson's not a sauna guy, but Darlene's got a big sauna out there. Darlene's usually hosting the team get-togethers when those are happening. So, and it would probably alleviate some of the pressure of like, oh, you need to, find a place to pay rent. And what if they do get sent back? The whole, thing. It would be a little bit more of a, easier move for them. And the country aspect of it is big, I think, for these guys. So, especially Roseanne and Oslin, being together, they've been together, in Rochester, they've gotten to know each other pretty well. I think it's a nice development, really. And you mentioning Kozak and Dunn is important here as well, because we did speak about the depth. It all, it is certainly, it's a feather in the cap a little bit here of Kevin Adams to have some of these guys that were drafted and developed. But it's also, in a way, alleviating some of the excuse from this team about the injuries because, would Justin Danforth be giving them as much as, how much more would he be giving them than Dunn or Roseanne is giving them at the moment, or Kozak? Like, these guys wouldn't have had these opportunities, wouldn't be making these plays, wouldn't be scoring these goals. And so what they're getting from Dunn, Kozak, Roseanne, and Osland, it does take away a little bit of this built-in excuse they've had for a while because they're getting guys to step up. They're getting exactly what you would want in this situation, especially from high picks like Roseanne and Osland. This is when they should be doing this. And what I think the most encouraging aspect of this development is it should put some pressure on guys like Jack Quinn and Peyton Krebs. Like, those are the guys I'm kind of looking at. Of course, Geertsen for a roster spot, but it also might, I think Quinn and Krebs and these guys that are in the middle of the lineup, like, it gives Lindy some levers to pull if they stick around. And even if they don't, I guess, they're just
Well,
an hour and 15-minute ride away, and you know what they can do now.
gives Lindy levers to pull. Does it give Kevin levers to pull, or whoever is going to be, to the point of our conversation on Friday, whoever is going to be pulling the levers in the front office, right? Because depth is important. But if you like the way that the team is playing with these different pieces now getting their opportunity, I'm of the opinion that Kevin still has, I think, some moves to make. And I keep saying Kevin because he's the general manager. Okay. Yarmo, the conglomerate, whatever we want to dub them. Kevmo. They have to do something, I think. Not just to make room, but I think they're still, I'm waiting for that, inevitable, here they are again. And the
There's going to be
problems
a
that
lull.
we've discussed
There's going to be a
multiple
lull.
times.
I mean,
right. But you can't, here's the thing. They have to play at what? As of Friday, 102-point pace, was it?
102-point pace, and
Okay.
maybe
You
they
can't
knocked
have
a point off
lulls.
that.
All right. You can't have lulls. All
You can
right.
have games,
So,
you can't have lulls. You can have an off night here and there, but you can't have too many of them, right? You don't need to go undefeated, but you can't be stacking three. You can't do the 3-4 loss in a row thing again. It's just
okay.
not going to work.
So you mentioned a couple players, but those are kind of the obvious ones. By the way, Quinn's been playing some inspired hockey the past couple of games.
I've thought that he's
Since
turned it around.
Osland Roseanne, when they put him on there, like, it's been actually the young kids have helped get Quinn going, I think. Now, I don't know if it's because he's like, oh, these guys are nipping at my heels, or maybe it just works from a chemistry perspective. I don't know. Krebs is Krebs. We've talked about it for 2 years. Where the hell does he fit? But with Alex Tuck still unsigned, you're kind of getting at this decision point with him. We're going to keep talking about it until we know what the decision is. Adrian Kempe signs his deal, the last of the big names, I think, at least in his class, right? Panarin's still out there. There's another one still out there, right? Is Tuck a name that's sitting there in this stack of a discussion topic with other teams if you're not going to sign him? Like, don't you think that they need to get this done now that the Kempe deal's done? And that's the domino, right?
It should be. I mean, it's the closest comp. They're the same age. I think Kempe might be 6 years younger, and
Don't
he got
Tuck the domino for the whole thing too, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. I
Yeah.
think
Sorry, I didn't want to mislead you, but
well,
I mean, but you're right though. I think the Kempe is
so
the domino. Yeah.
they do need to do something with the roster, and I look at two things that are reaching kind of a critical point. Tuck being one of them, and the three goalie rotation being another, because Colton Ellis had another strong game. He's played 3 out of the last 4. They've given Alex Lyon a legitimate rest here for the first time seemingly all season, which I think will be good for him. But I think they've reached a point, or they're getting close to it, where you're getting a body of work on Ellis and you need to decide. And does that mean that you try to find a Luukkonen trade? Carrying 3 goalies when you have these young guys forcing your hand. What do they say all the time? Like, these guys, when they earn it, when they force our hand, we'll find a spot. Well, now you kind of need to find a spot. So that's one of them. But the Tuck thing is another, you know, it's definitely reaching that crunch time, because Kempe signs for 8 by 10.6 with a deal that has plenty of signing bonus, like a lot of these contracts have. And I wrote about a little over a week ago about this sort of trend in the NHL with these big contracts, especially guys who are scheduled to be UFAs, especially guys who are later in their career, in that age bracket that tucks in 28, 29, 30, in that sort of mode. And the big thing with these guys is signing bonus, right? It is Kempe's deal has a $1 million salary in the first year and $11 million bonus. That's the first 3 years of the deal. 1 million salary, 11 million bonus. Why is that important? It's important because the Sabres have not spent that way. They have not used signing bonus the same way other teams have. In the story I wrote a few weeks ago, I pointed out that basically all of these guys, Kyle Connor, Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, they all have contracts that are at least, I think Kyle Connor was the lowest with 40% of the deal as signing bonus. The Sabres, by comparison, their spending on signing bonus is like fourth bottom from the league. They're spending like $4 million this year. And all the big contracts that they've done, Dahlin, Thompson, Cousins, Samuelson, Power, they've come in somewhere in the 5% of the total contract in terms of signing bonus. They get like a $5 million bonus in year one. It's different for each player. I think Dahlin got the most, but they haven't done it. It's because you got to cut the check on July 1, the big check, right? And we've talked about the financial piece of this for the Sabres. On the business side, they're not flush with cash. And so paying players salaries and game checks as the money's coming in fiscally probably makes more sense for the team. They used to spend on signing bonuses before the pandemic. They don't now. And Kevin Adams said before the season that, it's just sort of the structure that we're comfortable with. We have an internal structure, this and that. But the market is telling you that you need to change it. And I'm not saying for sure that this is what is holding up a Tuck negotiation, but I think if you put together some of the puzzle pieces, it's one of only a few things. Tuck's hesitant about being here. The Sabres are hesitant about giving him a long-term deal, or the signing bonus is a sticking point. I think if they had come with a strong offer in the summer, July or August, even 8 by 9.5, 8 by 10, structured with a lot of signing bonus up front, they would have probably gotten this deal done. And the signing bonus is more than just, there's a vanity piece to this. I think there's an ego piece for players. It's like, this guy got it, so I want it, kind of a merit badge, if you will. But there's also real life implications here for players. You get the signing bonus. I mean, I am not a financial analyst, but if you get $10 million on July 1st, it's worth more because you can put it in the market, and, with inflation and everything else. I mean, you look at Jack Eichel's contract, he's getting like $35 million within the first calendar year of the deal because he's getting $16 million bonus on July 1st and then another one the following July 1st. You're getting a significant amount more money than if you spread that out over 2 years of game checks. So there's that component of it. But the other piece, which I think is important for Alex Tuck and probably why it's important to both sides of this negotiation, is the signing bonus makes your contract somewhat buyout proof, right? If you've gotten paid up front, there's less incentive for the team to buy you out on the back half of the deal. Also, why, because you only save money on the salary in a buyout. The signing bonus is a way to sort of guarantee your money. And for a player like Tuck, I mean, even for a player like Eichel, any of these guys, McDavid's doesn't really apply because he only signed a 2-year deal and he's Connor McDavid. But if in years 6, 7, and 8 of your contract, you're not the same player, and the team could buy you out, they don't have as much incentive to do so if they've already paid you, 70% of the deal or whatever in signing bonus. Some of these guys are getting 90, 92% of their contract in bonus. And at that point, you're not buying that guy out. They actually capped it in the new CBA at 60% of the contract because
Yes, right.
some owners are viewing this as a competitive advantage for certain teams because they're willing to spend. Florida, we talk about taxes, weather, all that. They spend a crazy amount in signing bonuses. They're spending, $80 million in signing bonuses this year. All those guys they retain. Go to Puckpedia, look at the contracts, all signing bonus. Vegas, tons of signing bonus. Edmonton is shelling it out for their big guys. Toronto has always done this. New York, these teams, we talk about the haves and the have-nots and the spending. Yes, the Sabres are closer to the cap right now. They're still way to the bottom of the league. The only team really that is low in signing bonus spending and has a real chance to win the cup is Winnipeg. Colorado's hovering around the 20 million range, but they got some of their deals done before this trend really accelerated. And Natchez, who they just signed, big signing bonus. Winnipeg, Kyle Connor, 40% in signing bonus. It was a big part of getting that deal over the line and convincing him to stay.
Winnipeg has some problems at the gate, though, right? Very
Well,
similar
Winnipeg, no, yeah,
to a
that's why I
Buffalo
bring up,
Sabres team. Yeah, yeah.
and they bent. They bent. They said, we got to keep this player. There is a small tax advantage, but from what I was, told by, a few agents that have, done this thing, is that the tax thing is a little bit smaller of a deal. It can be a big deal depending on the player, like Austin Matthews getting a big signing bonus and getting to tax that in the US versus Canada. Like that can be financially a little bit of an advantage as well. I don't think it's really relevant to Tuck's situation because he resides in the same place that he plays, but getting it at all when you talk about maximizing your earning potential, which this is a chance for Tuck to do that, a sort of once in a career chance to do that, it's going to matter. And so these other teams are looking at the market. I mean, even Winnipeg doing it with Kyle Connor shows they're saying, all right, we've got to make an exception here. And when you don't have leverage, kind of like Winnipeg didn't, right? You don't want to lose Kyle Connor when you're in a Stanley Cup window. And you're probably going to lose him if you don't step up to the plate and do this. An American born player playing in Winnipeg, they have the same disadvantages, probably even more so than the Sabres do, other than the fact that they've been winning. But financially, they're probably in a similar battle. And other than the fact that they're getting playoff revenue. And, their locale has the same weather issues, Canadian taxes, like the whole thing. So it's an interesting wrinkle to this whole thing. As you mentioned, they've got to decide here at some point, right? At some point, either Tuck's got to decide, the Sabres have to decide, Terry Pagula has to decide if he's willing to pay that signing bonus and bend on. Look, Tuck has more leverage than any of the other guys did. They were all RFAs when they signed their deals with low signing bonus. So, and they were young, right? Tage Thompson, Dahlin, all of these guys could pretty confidently say, I mean, I know Matthias Samuelsson buyout chatter was sort of entering the conversation this summer from a, public perception. It
I wouldn't
wasn't
say
happening.
sort of. It was there.
It
But
wasn't
yeah.
happening internally, but like a young guy signing one of these deals can be somewhat confident that they're not going to get bought out unless things really take a bad turn. So the signing bonus isn't as big of a deal. But for a player like Tuck, it's a big deal. It's not only buyout proof, it's lockout proof too, because you got to get your signing bonus during the lockout. And not that they're heading for a lockout anytime soon, but
In the
you
life
never
of his,
know.
there could be, right?
So will they step up and do that? And does Tuck want to be here? Those are kind of the two things. And when you're sitting there at below 500 as Thanksgiving's approaching, this is sort of the doomsday scenario we discussed in the summer. If you don't get it done, the vibe can shift pretty quickly with this team. and it's helter-skelter right now, but it's not exactly a strong vibe heading into Thanksgiving, that line of demarcation. And so if Tuck decides this isn't for him, that puts the Sabres at a pressure point of, do they trade the player to shake things up? And what does that trade look like? I think if you get the trade done early enough, it can be sort of a hockey trade. But the longer you wait, the more it becomes a futures-based deal, I think, because as you get
Closer
close
you
to
get
the
to the
deadline,
deadline. Yeah. Yep.
teams aren't getting as much runway with the player, and they're not getting, the same, I think somebody trading for him would probably confidently think they could sign him. But here's the other thing financially on this. Are you willing to retain money if you trade him? Because they haven't done that either.
If they're going to retain, they're going to do it on Luukkonen.
I mean, they got multiple retention slots.
Yeah.
It's another piece to the financial game of this whole thing is when you're rebuilding, and they're not rebuilding anymore, but when they were rebuilding, they didn't really leverage the cap space in that way that you see other
Yeah.
teams do it. And so would they do that here to increase the return? All hypotheticals, of course, particularly with Tuck and also Luukkonen, but are you willing to do that to maximize your return on either of those guys? These
Well,
are
they got
all
to get
money
healthy.
questions.
Well, we know they're already in a cap concern right now, just with all the bodies that are on the books right now. And I don't know. I mean, look, the thing, just to bring it back to like the Tuck situation, I think, and that was a good summation for those that weren't familiar with the bonus landscape in the league. Tuck is certainly a player that is worthy, deserving of bonuses in his contract, given the shift that's happened in the past half decade plus in the league. I think Kempe sets his ceiling, right? No doubt. Kempe's a good player type comparison. The Connor situation is a good
Yeah.
situation. Yeah, Kyle Connor. I mean, if he wasn't an outdoorsman, that whole thing could change.
If
If
he
Alex
didn't
Tuck
and he
wasn't
didn't
from
love those
Syracuse,
guys,
New
yeah,
York, the thing could change, right?
100%.
So yeah, very interesting situation. It's shit or get off the pot for the Sabres when it comes to Tuck at this point with Kempe signed. And a lot of
And
times too,
Tuck.
like with the bonuses,
And Tuck.
by the way, and Tuck, yeah, I get it. But I mean, I think that the keys like to this deal are in the Sabres hands.
They are
And
100%.
look, to your point about the vanity piece, and I often say in life, comparison is the thief of joy. Not when you lay out the financial impact of getting that money. It's not. I think Tuck is deserving of it, and they got to pony up and give it to him. They got to find a way. If that's what he wants, and he should want it.
I mean, why
He should
wouldn't he
want it.
want it? Why
He
wouldn't he
should
want
want
it,
it.
right?
Okay.
Everybody else is
Yes.
getting it. And I think for some of these guys, I guess it's true for all of them, right? You're signing an 8-year deal. You're going to be 36, 37, whatever, when the thing ends. You want some protection in that case. If the idea is, oh, in Buffalo, I can get the 8th year, so I'm making more money. That's only true if you're guaranteed a chunk of that money. So it becomes very real for Alex Tuck, who I think he has a chance to age pretty well, but it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee for anybody in the league that they're going to play well. And if the cap keeps going up, the contract shouldn't be a problem, but you want to protect yourself. And that's the biggest piece of this for Tuck, especially because he's been pretty healthy the last few years, but he's been nicked up before that in his career, and that stuff can pile up. He's got a lot of wear and tear on the body, so this is your chance. You've got the leverage. This is your chance to get as much money as possible, and one way to do that is to look, you talk about the Buffalo tax or whatever. Like, I think 10-6 is now the ceiling for Tuck because of Kempe, but maybe he can get a little extra because of the Buffalo tax or whatever. I don't know. It's possible. the leverage is certainly in his corner. But one thing he should be able to do, one thing that leverage should be able to get him is some of that money up front. Part of why the teams like to do this, by the way, part of why it's seen as an advantage is not just a recruiting tool, not just like, hey, come to Florida because we'll give you signing bonus. It's when they're retaining their own players. Eichel could have probably pushed for 14 plus million on an AAV, but by getting more of that money up front, if you calculate it from a math standpoint, it's like, well, I don't need 14 million AAV because if I get this all up front and you spread it out, I'm actually making more than 14 million a year over the life of this contract, and the team gets some cap savings. They get to give them a smaller AAV because they're giving some of it up front. So it's a benefit to the teams that care about cap dollars over everything else. They don't care about cash spending. The Sabres aren't one of those teams.
They have a formula that works for them. The Sabres do. That formula really is just giving a bonus in the first year of the
And then
contract.
flat. Yeah.
That's how Tage got it, Darlene, Owen Power, Dylan Cousins, you name it. You can see it when you go to Puckpedia, to your point earlier. Sabres just going to have to compromise. Maybe they don't have to, you don't have to give them a bonus every year, but you can certainly give them more than the first year. And I think that's what they need to figure out. Again, if it's an issue, I think it is. If I was Tuck's representation, I'd be pushing for it because the Sabres don't do it and it's something that you want and you're open to leaving. Another team is going to give you a bonus-laden contract. That's just how it's going to work. There are players that are less effective than Alex Tuck that have bonuses. And then the Sabres get to do it all over again with the next batch of free agents. But one of those guys that probably won't be pushing too hard for bonuses is Zach Benson. I don't know if you ever looked at his agent and the contracts that he's negotiated. It's Ross Burney. He has Devon Taves. He has Manson. I think he only negotiated 1 year of bonuses in their extensions. And that fits right into what the Sabres like to do.
And Benson's in that age range. Look, that's where the Sabres can make the exception. As it was explained to me by people who have negotiated these things, they say it's not really a huge problem all the time if a team doesn't do it. If that's just sort of their operating stance, like the Ducks aren't real big on it. There's a handful of these teams. It's like, okay, that's okay as long as you don't do it for the next guy, right? You can't say you don't do it and then do it for the next guy, but there's always an exception. And given everything with Tuck, it's pretty easy to make that exception and still pretty easy to go to Benson and say, look, even Doan, Kesselring, these guys that are coming up, you guys are RFAs. You guys are younger. Like Benson shouldn't be worried about his contract being bought out, so there's no reason for him to get that, I mean, it would be a nice move, but they don't need to do it. Lane Hudson got a bunch of bonuses in his contract in Montreal. Montreal is pretty big on bonuses, but interestingly, JJ Peterka got none. So, Utah, formerly Arizona, a lot of those guys don't have it. It's interesting, the Bartletts who represent Alex Tuck, a lot of their contracts aren't like crazy signing bonus contracts, but this is obviously a situation where they can push for it and should push for it for a lot of reasons for the player. So it doesn't need to be this thing that changes the precedent in Buffalo. But if you want to keep Tuck, then I feel like you kind of have to bend on this.
Sabres winners of 2 straight. We'll keep talking about the Alex Tuck scenario until we know how the story's going to end. Calgary, Chicago, Carolina coming up. Next 3 games, 3 Cs. And the Sabres need to be above average in each of those games. I think safe to say. Matthew Fairburn, a little bit of a shorter. We're going to go a little shorter today, I think. We should probably get us out of here a little earlier than normal. You want to do your plugs, and we will leave some meat on the bone for the next time you and I get together.
Yeah, you can find all of my work at theathletic.com/Sabres. Appreciate everyone reading over there and subscribing here at the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on, an audio platform, the added subscriptions over the last few weeks have been encouraging. So we appreciate that. Leave a comment on the video. It helps us grow the show and continue bringing you these on a regular basis.
Leave a comment on your term AAV for Alex Tuck if you want him signed. If not, share your thoughts on what you think the Sabres front office should do. And what's your deadline? What's your deadline for? You have to have a drop dead date for the Sabres and getting this done. You can't take it too close to the deadline for reasons that we've already mentioned, in my opinion. That's the storyline. It was the storyline a couple months ago. It's still the storyline now, regardless of how the Sabres are performing on the ice. For Matthew Fairburn, you can read all of his work at theathletic.com/Sabres. For the production crew, who I think just put their hands over Aspen's mouth as she started barking. She was really good for about 40 minutes, and she's been acting up here because she did not eat breakfast before we hit record on this podcast. I'm Chris Baker. Matthew and I will be back again very soon, and we will see you then.